Well, good evening. Welcome to the planetarium of the New Jersey State Museum. My name is Bill Murray, planetarium technician at the planetarium. Let's take a look at some of the interesting sights that are visible in our August skies this year. We're currently looking towards the east on the evening of Friday, August 26th. It's about 9:15 p.m. And as we do so, we can see the summer triangle, which we were introduced to last month in our Sky Views segment. And we're going to talk more about that today. But below the summer triangle, we can actually see some of the constellations of autumn now beginning to rise in our late summer skies here in New Jersey. We'll have more to say about that next month. But now let's take a look in more detail at the summer triangle. As we said last month, the summer triangle consists of the bright star Vega in the constellation of Lyra the Harp, Deneb, which forms the tail of the constellation of Cygnus the Swan, and Altair, brightest star in the constellation of Aquila, the Eagle. In addition to those three major constellations, there are two other smaller constellations also located within the summer triangle. There is the small but easily recognizable constellation of Sagitta the Arrow, and above it, the kind of dim and much more difficult to recognize constellation of Vulpecula, the Fox. Last month, we talked about the very interesting multiple star system, Epsilon Lyrae, the double-double star in the constellation of Lyra the Harp. There's another interesting double star also in this area of the sky. It is the star that makes up the nose of Cygnus the Swan, called Alberio. Alberio is an excellent example of the fact that stars have different colors. Most stars in the sky have some color, but the saturation of those colors is very low, so to our eyes, they all look white when they're widely separated in the sky. But when stars are right next to each other, as in the pair with Alberio, the colors become much more apparent. Alberio consists of a pair of third and sixth magnitude stars. The third magnitude star, being the brighter one, is orange, and the sixth magnitude star, the dimmer one, is blue. Stars have different colors because they have different temperatures. Just like a red ember that you see burning in a fire is going to be cooler than the hot blue flame that's coming out of the gas stove that's in your kitchen, blue stars are hotter than red stars. Blue stars have a surface temperature of about 25,000 degrees Kelvin. Next cooler are blue-white stars at about 10,000 degrees Kelvin. Yellow stars like our sun have a surface temperature of about 6,000 degrees Kelvin. Orange stars, 4,000 degrees Kelvin, and coolest are the red stars with a surface temperature of about 3,000 degrees Kelvin. The summer triangle encompasses a very rich and dense area of the Milky Way. So let's take a look now at two objects that show what the fate of our sun is going to be in several billion years when it exhausts its hydrogen fuel. And those are the Planetary Nebula M57, the Ring Nebula in the constellation of Lyra, and M27, the Dumbbell Nebula in the constellation of Vulpecula, the Fox. Planetary nebula actually have nothing to do with planets. The name comes from the 18th century astronomer William Herschel, the discoverer of the planet Uranus. He discovered a number of these objects in the nighttime sky and thought they resembled dimmer versions of the planets Jupiter and Saturn, thus the name. This is actually what's going to happen to our sun in about 5 billion years. Stars like our sun can last for about 10 billion years before exhausting their fuel. Our sun is about halfway through its lifespan. When it does exhaust its fuel in about 5 billion years, it will begin to expand into a red giant star, and then when it expands, it will begin to pulsate, and most of the remaining material in the star will be blown off into a bubble of gas expanding out from the dead core of the star, a white dwarf. There are thousands of these objects that are visible in our galaxy with amateur-sized telescopes, but perhaps one of the brightest and definitely the most famous one is located in the constellation of Lyra, the famous Ring Nebula, M57, the 57th object on French comet hunter Charles Messier's list of non-comets. And in small telescopes, it looks nothing more than like a small little smoke ring drifting in space. Long exposure images show much more detail. Here we see such an image of the Ring Nebula, illustrating the bubble of gas that is escaping out from the dead core of the star. For a few thousand years after the bubble begins to expand from the star, radiation from the star will cause it to fluoresce. And so we see here the reddish gas areas are actually hydrogen gas that is fluorescing, and the bluish and greenish areas are oxygen gas that is fluorescing. After a few thousand years, the bubble expands and the star cools, and the nebula dies. So these planetary nebula are short-lived phenomena in our universe. Planetary nebula have an enormous variety of different appearances in small telescopes, and there's another one in this region of the sky as well that's also very interesting to look at. As I said before, it's located in the constellation, the dim constellation of Vulpecula the Fox, and it's the 27th object on Charles Messier's list, called the Dumbbell Nebula. In small telescopes, the Dumbbell Nebula resembles this drawing. We can see its two-lobed appearance, which gives the nebula its name. In larger telescopes, though, and in images, the dumbbell shows a lot more detail. So this long exposure image is an example of what I mean. In it, you can see the dumbbell shape, or some people think of it as a half-eaten apple, outlined with the red hydrogen gas. But also shown are some very faint details that are very difficult to see visually, and that are the ansae, which are these extensions going east-west, outlined in very faint blue, and that is ionized oxygen gas. Well, that's a bit of a detailed look at some of the interesting deep sky objects visible within the summer triangle. For next month, the beginning of fall in September, we'll talk a little bit about some of the early fall constellations. Until then, from all of us here at the New Jersey State Museum Planetarium, clear skies.